Now, Iraq has launched restoration work at the Ziggurat of Ur as authorities warn that climate-driven erosion is threatening one of the world's oldest surviving monuments.
A hidden chamber under the Ziggurat of Ur reveals a 4,600-year-old body. In early 1923, Leonard Woolley is digging beneath the Great Ziggurat of Ur in southern Iraq, expecting nothing stranger than clay tablets and broken pottery. Instead, his tools strike a shaft driven deep into the bedrock, packed solid by hand and sealed shut on purpose. At the bottom of it is a chamber no record mentions, and on a stone slab inside that chamber lies a body that has waited there for 4,600 years. Nobody hides a hidden room under 60 feet of sacred brick for an ordinary corpse. Whoever sealed this one was not burying the dead. They were containing it.
Moving on, Iraq has launched restoration work at the Ziggurat of Ur as authorities warn that climate-driven erosion is now threatening one of the world's oldest surviving monuments.
The dig. In 1922, British archaeologist Leonard Woolley began digging beneath the Great Ziggurat of Ur in southern Iraq. He was hunting for the ordinary stuff of Mesopotamian archaeology, the clay tablets and pottery shards that fill every catalog of a dig like this. That is what the job is. 99 days out of 100. You dig, you brush, you log fragments. Nobody warns you about the 100th day. The Great Ziggurat of Ur was not some random temple. It was the centerpiece of the ancient Sumerian city of Ur, dedicated to the moon god Nana.
Iraqi teams are working to restore the historic Ziggurat of Ur, a massive temple tower from the Sumerian era.
Built around 2100 BCE by King Ur-Nammu, it rose more than 60 feet into the desert sky on 3 massive terraces stacked one on top of the other. The Sumerians did not build for show. Every brick, every angle, every chamber had a purpose. And according to their own texts, the ziggurats were not only places of worship, they were meeting points between humans and the Anunnaki, the beings who descended from the heavens to teach mankind the secrets of civilization. Hold that word. You are going to need it later. When Woolley's team broke through the floor of the lower terrace in early 1923, they expected storage rooms, maybe a foundation deposit with a few ceremonial objects. Instead, they found a vertical shaft dropping another 20 feet below the base of the ziggurat. The shaft had been packed solid with compacted earth and rubble, not collapsed, filled by hand. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure this space stayed shut, and nobody fills a hole that deep unless they are hiding what is at the bottom of it.
Iraq is restoring the ancient Ziggurat of Ur using traditional methods and local materials. The effort aims to preserve one of the world's oldest architectural landmarks.
The chamber. At the bottom of that shaft was a small rectangular chamber, roughly 10 feet by 12, carved directly into the bedrock. Here is the first thing that should have made Woolley uneasy. The walls were smooth, almost polished, no tool marks anywhere. That is not how you carve rock with copper chisels in 2100 BCE, and Woolley knew it, and his notes go quiet right at the moment they should have gotten excited. And in the center of the room, on a raised stone platform, lay a body, not in a coffin, not wrapped, not surrounded by the gold and pottery and weapons that follow a king into the ground. Just laid out alone on a stone slab in a room someone built specifically to hide it. Think about that for a second. The Sumerians buried their kings with treasure, with servants, with everything they would need on the other side. This man got none of it. He got a sealed shaft, a stone slab, and silence. You do not seal a chamber under 60 feet of sacred architecture for a corpse you want forgotten. You seal it like that for one you are afraid of. The body. Woolley described it in his field notes as remarkably intact. The skin had mummified naturally in the dry desert air, but the features were still distinguishable. The individual appeared to be male. His hands were folded carefully across his chest, the posture deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if someone had arranged him with great care rather than simply laid him to rest. And he wore a robe made from a fabric Woolley could not identify. It was not linen, it was not wool. The material had a strange metallic sheen to it, and after 4,600 years in the ground, it had not deteriorated. Sit with that. Everything organic in that chamber should have been dust. The cloth was not. But here is where it gets worse. There were no burial goods, no pottery, no weapons, no jewelry, nothing that accompanies a royal interment. The only other object in that room was a stone tablet propped against the wall, covered in cuneiform that Woolley's translator initially could not read. When the translation finally came back, it was not a dedication. It was not a prayer. It read, "He who was sent from the sky now sleeps beneath the house of Nana. Do not disturb the one who waits. His time is not yet come. The seal must hold until the appointed hour." Read that again. Do not disturb the one who waits. That is not how you write about the dead. You do not tell people not to wake a corpse. What did not add up? Then there was the body itself, and the numbers refused to behave. No trauma, no wounds, no disease. Carbon dating did not exist in 1923, but later analysis of the fabric placed the burial around 4,600 years ago, which should drop it cleanly into the early dynastic period of Sumer. Fine. Except the chamber that held it, the precision of the stonework, those impossible polished walls, all of it belonged to a level of craftsmanship mainstream archaeology swears the Sumerians had not reached yet. So, you have a man in a fabric that should not survive, in a room that should not exist, under a warning that talks about him like he is sleeping rather than dead. And here is the part nobody likes to say out loud. Woolley brought that chamber's contents up into the daylight. Within 5 years, the men who went down into it with him started dying, and they did not die quietly. The gaps in the archive. Woolley shipped the body and the tablet to the British Museum in London. The official record listed it as artifact UR7734, described simply as mummified remains, early dynastic period, provenance uncertain. The tablet was translated, filed, and forgotten. The body vanished from the public record sometime in the 1940s. Now, follow me here, because this is the part they would rather you skim past. Researchers who actually went into the British Museum archives found gaps in the cataloging. Artifact numbers skip entire sequences. NUR7734 sits right inside one of those holes. Some archivists say the Blitz destroyed it. Others say it was quietly moved somewhere safe before the bombing ever started. A few say it was never supposed to be cataloged at all. If you are still here, you already understand this is not normal, and you are exactly who I make these for. A body that should not exist, logged into the one institution built to preserve everything, and then erased from its own ledger. Subscribe before we go further down, because the channels that cover what got scrubbed out of the official record do not stay up forever, and the next part is where it stops being about paperwork. Because of what happened to the men who opened that chamber, within 5 years, 3 of the lead archaeologists who entered it were dead. One, a sudden heart attack at 32. Another, a car accident witnesses called impossible. The vehicle swerving off a straight, empty road with nothing in its path. The third simply walked off a routine dig in Egypt and was never found. 3 men, 1 room, 5 years. And the only one left alive went strange. The obsession? Woolley himself could not let it go. He went back to that ziggurat again and again between 1928 and 1934, always inventing a reason to dig nearby, always looking for something he never put in a public report. His field notes from those years stop reading like an archaeologist's. They fill with symbols that appear in no known Sumerian text, with calculations of astronomical alignments, and with the same phrase written over and over, the sleeper and the door that opens both ways. You have to understand who Woolley was before this. Meticulous, rational, the model of academic rigor, the kind of man whose notes were boring on purpose. After that chamber, he turned secretive, paranoid. He started carrying a small clay cylinder seal everywhere he went, one he had lifted from the site and never logged. It showed a figure lying on a platform beneath a structure shaped like the ziggurat, with stars arranged above it in a deliberate pattern. When colleagues asked about it, he would only say it was insurance. He never once said against what, and a man does not carry insurance against the dead. Those who came down. So, let us talk about the word I told you to hold, the Anunnaki. This is where mainstream archaeology gets visibly uncomfortable, so stay with me. In Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki were beings who came down from the sky to earth. The name itself translates roughly to those who from heaven to earth came. They were described as tall, possessed of knowledge far beyond early humans. They taught the Sumerians agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, metallurgy. They built the first cities. They handed over the first written language, and the texts do not describe them as spirits. They describe them as physical. They ate, they drank. They had children with human women. The Sumerian king list records pre-flood kings ruling for tens of thousands of years. King Alulim for 28,800. King Enmenluana for 43,200. Scholars call those numbers myth. But here is what bothers me, and it should bother you too. These were the same people whose trade receipts and astronomical tables were accurate to the fraction. They were obsessive record keepers. Why would a civilization that careful suddenly start lying only when writing down its own origins? And the texts draw a hard line. Humans were the black-headed people. The Anunnaki were those who from heaven to earth came. Different name, different origin. Stated plainly by people who had no reason to invent a distinction that careful. They built the ziggurat to honor and to house these beings. Keep that verb in your head. House them. The Lord of the Good Tree. One of them comes up again and again. Ningish Zida, the Lord of the Good Tree, tied in the texts to knowledge, to healing, and to resurrection. Sometimes drawn as a serpent, sometimes as a tall humanoid, with features that did not look quite right. And according to the cylinder seals from the site, he had a job. He was the guardian of the threshold between worlds, the keeper of things that were not supposed to be disturbed. His symbol was a staff with two serpents wound around it, rising toward the sky. You already know that symbol. It became the caduceus, still stamped on medicine today, and it shows up carved into Sumerian temple walls, including fragments at the base of the Ziggurat of Ur. So ask the question I think you are already asking. What if the body in that chamber was not just any of them? What if it was Ningish Zida himself, the keeper of the threshold, preserved, warned over, and waiting? Now go back to the robe with that in your head, a metallic sheen, on cloth, in 2100 BCE. The texts describe Anunnaki garments that shimmered like fish scales or gleamed like polished bronze, yet stayed soft to the touch. And go back to the body, 6 feet tall, in a population whose men average 5'2". A man like that would have loomed over every person who ever saw him. The Anunnaki were always described as taller. Not a king then, not a priest. One of them, sealed under the most sacred structure in the city, preserved, protected, told to wait. Do not disturb the one who waits. His time is not yet come. What hour? And why keep a body breathing ready for it unless someone expected to need it back? The cycle. Stay with me, because this is the part that reframes everything. The ziggurat was not only Nana's house, it was bound to a knowledge of cycles, of time, of the sky turning. The Sumerians tracked the planets with a precision that would not be matched for thousands of years. They timed the lunar month to fractions of a second. They understood precession, the slow 26,000-year wobble of Earth's axis, and they believed time was a circle, that history repeated, that the gods would come back. So picture the chamber as part of that circle, not a grave, a failsafe, something stored on purpose to be opened when the wheel came around again. And Woolley felt it. In a 1924 letter not made public until decades after his death, he wrote that the chamber felt wrong, that standing in it felt like being watched, like intruding on something still running. He wrote that the stone platform was warm to the touch while the bedrock around it was cold. His Iraqi workers, men raised on stories about that ziggurat, refused to go back down after the first day. They said the air was heavy, the silence was unnatural, a warm slab in cold rock. Sit with that one. Woolley wanted to keep digging, to find out if there were more chambers, more shafts. Within weeks, the Iraqi authorities shut him down. No reason given. He was told to fill the shaft, restore the floor, and move his work elsewhere. He complied. As far as the public record knows, that chamber has never been reopened. The night visitors. That is the public record. Here is what does not match it. Persistent reports say the site was revisited in the 1960s by a joint American and British team. No permits were issued. No reports were filed. Locals remember military vehicles, equipment hauled into the ziggurat complex in the dark, ground-penetrating radar, sealed containers lowered into the structure. 2 weeks later, everything was gone, the team was gone, and the Iraqi government declared the interior of the ziggurat off-limits to all future archaeology. One local worker who helped unload that equipment said he overheard the team talking about readings, about energy signatures coming from beneath the structure, about something still active down there. He said they started excited and got nervous as the work went on. On the last night, he watched them seal the entrance with what looked like a steel vault door, far heavier than any dig site would ever need. 3 months later, that worker disappeared. His family filed a report that went nowhere. The official conclusion was that he had moved away for work without telling anyone, even though all his belongings were still in his home, and he had left behind a wife and 3 children. People who relocate for work take their things. They do not leave 3 children behind. 3 men in the 20s, 1 worker in the 60s. The chamber has a way of removing the people who get close to it. The heat beneath it does not stop in the 60s. In 1991, during the Gulf War, coalition aerial surveillance ran over the region, and declassified thermal scans of the ziggurat show a heat signature beneath the structure, right about where Woolley's shaft would have been. The differential was slight but steady. Either geothermal activity, which does not occur anywhere else in that region, or something below the surface generating a small, continuous amount of heat. Rock does not stay warm for 4,000 years. Something has to be doing it. After the 2003 invasion, the U.S. military set up a temporary base by the ziggurat and held a constant presence for about 6 months. The stated reason was protecting the site from looters, which would be noble if they had done the same for the hundreds of other sites stripped bare in that same period. They did not. Just this one. Just the structure with the sealed chamber. Locals who worked that base describe specialists flown in, people who were not regular military and wore no standard uniform, arriving in unmarked helicopters, spending hours inside the complex, leaving without a word. Then, as fast as it started, the base was abandoned, leaving only tire tracks and a reinforced gate that had not been there before, sealing off the interior courtyard. The appointed hour. So here is the question nobody in mainstream archaeology will touch, and you have earned the right to ask it. If that body really was one of the Anunnaki, and it really was being preserved for some future purpose, then what happens when the purpose arrives? What happens when the appointed hour actually comes? Nobody planning a permanent burial writes a deadline into the headstone. The tablet did. Somebody expected a clock to run out. The Sumerian texts speak of a return, of the gods coming back to reclaim what was theirs, of a time when the old knowledge would be needed again. And if those texts are not myth, if they are records of things that happened, then the body beneath the Ziggurat of Ur is not a relic of the past. It is a key to the future. Leonard Woolley died in 1960, never having fully explained what he found beneath that ziggurat. The tablet with the warning disappeared from the British Museum archives sometime in the 1950s. The body, if it still exists, is locked in a vault no researcher can reach. And the chamber itself remains sealed beneath thousands of tons of ancient brick, in a site technically open to archaeology, but practically untouchable. The official narrative says there is nothing unusual about the Ziggurat of Ur, just another Sumerian temple, just another piece of ancient architecture. But the people who actually stood in that chamber, who read the inscription, who felt the weight of what was deliberately hidden there, they tell a different story. They say the seal is still holding. They say whatever was placed beneath the ziggurat is still waiting. And they say that when the appointed hour finally arrives, the world is going to have to reckon with what the Sumerians knew all along. The gods did not disappear. They are only sleeping. And beneath the Ziggurat of Ur, in a chamber no one is allowed to enter, one of them is still down there, waiting for an hour nobody alive can name. If this is the kind of history they would rather you never heard, tell me in the comments what they buried it for. And watch the next one, because the chamber beneath the pyramids has a sealed door. No archaeologist has been allowed to open either.